Great, welcome back. This is a very exciting panel. Look forward to the discussion we'll be having. We have so many things to talk about, but very little time. And people are like running with their, as you know, so many things happening around the city, particularly about the United Nations this week. This is a great panel because I welcome here Her Excellency Justine Greening, the Secretary of State for International Development of the UK. Of course, you all know Ms. Helen Clark, Administrator of UNDP, and Jordania as well, Farah Mesmar, Youth Governance Accountability Task Force, Nick Hartley, CEO of Restless Development, and Honorable Alimamy Kamara, Youth Minister of Sierra Leone. Great to have you with us. And we will be having a few questions to start this panel with, but later we'll be having questions as well from some of the youth participants here. And just to connect with the message from the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Clark, you have championed youth engagement as well in the consultation. We know that UNDP have led this consultation process in so many countries, not only the online, we celebrate the online element, but there have been so much work offline in consulting young people. I think the question now is how to translate all that momentum in this historic moment as we transition and we switch gears to the implementation. How we are going to keep that momentum in the engagement of young people in the implementation.
Well, the most terrible thing that could happen would be if there was no more outreach and everyone went to sleep and governments then didn't take goals very seriously and nothing much happened. So that's not an option, right? That's plan ZZZ. So to keep up the momentum, I think we need to keep interacting the way we have. There's been tremendous outreach. We need to keep those online platforms going for people to be able to engage. I think social media is so powerful, and you and I and Justine and no doubt others on the panel are exponents of it. But it's really fantastic to get continuous feedback and ideas all the time, and youth are very, very savvy with social media. On the consultations, what came through was, it's great that we're being asked now, but don't then close the book on that and go away and do whatever you like. Young people, actually people of all ages, want to stay engaged. So they want to be part of implementation wherever they can, and to the extent that we can support countries with good youth strategies. And going beyond that, what do youth want? They want jobs, they want education, they want skills, they want opportunity, they want hope, they want sexual and reproductive health services, they want genuine access to broadband. I mean, there's some pretty fundamental things that are going to drive participation here. So youth need to be involved in implementation, and then on monitoring, they need access to the data. That means having the data, it means it being transparent, and it means people being able to use and analyse it. So I see a lot of entry points for this if we're all committed.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Follow that. We work in the youth sector for many years now. I think one of the questions have been always how to get the development agencies and more the major donors, like DFID, I would say, keeping this momentum in youth engagement and youth development. It's a demographic reality. The numbers, they speak to themselves. I think now, as we transition the implementation, any good news from DFID for young people?
So we're on a journey, I think, in DFID, finding out for ourselves how we can, in a very genuine way, start to pull young people into not just what the department's working on, but how we work every day of the week. And I think it really matters because certainly from my experience, when I was growing up, I just got very frustrated that I didn't get enough challenges. I would be working in a company where I was sure I could do the job that my boss's boss was doing, but I just never got that chance. And I think it's about giving people the opportunity to actually challenge themselves, to see whether they can do those sorts of bigger roles. So what we're doing is looking across the board within DFID about how we can pull young people in. We've done the Youth Summit a couple of weekends ago, which was really about saying, look, we've got this massive strategic question that's being discussed in New York. What is the message from UK youth that needs to be taken there? Rona and Arifa have been our amazing UK youth delegates. I think it's the first time we've ever had youth delegates as a formal part of our delegation. And I really just wanted to say to everyone else that we'll continue now to look at how we can not only have young people advocating for us and with us in making the case for development, but also this question about on the ground. What's the role that young people can play in delivering development and building that better world that addresses the global goals? And my last message to everyone here really was, I read this really thought-provoking book by an economist the other day, which was all about black swans, and it was about how these things can come out of nowhere and turn over the world economy, and they're negative. I think young people are white swans, because all of you have got the potential to really make an amazing, disproportionate difference on your communities, on your countries for the better. And I think if you can have the confidence to just give it a go and find out, then I think we'll really create an amazing virtuous circle. And I think your generation that, as was said, will be the one leading this world in the coming years, I think will be able to go into those roles developed with the kinds of skills that you need to do that job incredibly responsibly and to do that job well. And I think if we can play a role through the work we're doing on this to help you do that, then I think we'll have achieved a huge amount, as well as tackling the global goals. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's excellent. Thank you. Well, Farah, there was 193 youth in the opening ceremony when that agenda was adopted. And somebody said, this is a nice photo-op. I said, this is not a photo-op. This is about the follow-up. It's about the follow-up you will be making 15 years ahead. And I think Her Royal Highness said it very eloquently that it's all about young people now and holding governments accountable in the implementation. What do you have there?
Well, usually for us youth to be motivated to be part of a new trend, a new formula, or a new process, it has to be real and relatable to our lives. However, in a shrunk political space that limits our freedoms and limits our accessibility to information, these terminology of governance, accountability, and transparency cannot be relatable to us. So the problem is not about the lack of capacity of youth in governance and accountability, but rather in governments not wanting youth to be part of such processes. So for the SDGs to become a reality and to be more than a rhetoric aspirations, governments and world leaders should recognize that we are the change makers and we are the catalyst to make what's a rhetoric aspiration to become a reality in life. As without accountable institutions, how can poverty, education, or health, or even nutrition levels be reliably measured? How can corruption, a word only mentioned once in the SDGs, be combated? Without accountability and shadow reporting, there will be a huge shortage in reliable data that will be provided by youth, and I think that will be a huge problem. Thank you.
So you'll be holding us accountable to what we're talking about. That's very important. Nick, you have been championing this as well, and you talk about big idea. And I think they have been like a giant idea now for the world. It's the boldest commitment in the history of this planet. And I want to ask you about the role of international non-governmental organizations. Like Restless Development is a great example here. What do you have in the pipeline for youth engagement in the post-2015?
Thanks, Ahmad. What do we have? Well, let me start with the generic part about what you think about international NGOs. It's been so interesting listening in the last 3 days because nearly every conversation is either the role of business or the role of aid agencies or the role of government or the role of INGOs. And sometimes we call that civil society. And we talk a lot about how business and governments need to change. So here's a challenge to us is I think civil society needs to really reassess who they are and what they're saying they are. The be the change is a great phrase, but I'd like to take it a bit deeper, not to undermine Gandhi with his phrase, but I think we need to become the people that we all purport to serve. I think INGOs need to literally be the billions that are not online, that are not in these meetings, are not part of these declarations, and will possibly never know about these declarations. So for Restless, and for all civil society, I don't think this is about Restless development, I think we need to remodel how we get the people who we're serving to lead our organizations, to be the voice of our organizations, and INGOs can then be a bridge. And young people are brilliant at living in communities and committing at the front line. The minister in Sierra Leone, we know together that it's the 2,000 young people who were willing to live at the heart of the Ebola crisis and then report back to the aid agencies who were the most successful part of that. So I think it's that we need to have at the heart of change.
You know, I think that's, you mentioned Ebola. I want to exactly ask you about that experience. You remember we connected by video conference in the middle of the crisis. We all know that the response to Ebola has a young face. I mean, everyone was responding there. We were seeing this footage come from TV. And young people were volunteering in West Africa. And now, how to carry that, not in a response in a seasonal way, not in a response to a crisis, but to sustain that in engagement over 15 years to come. You know, that's the question of sustainable development goals. But I think among the 17, we need to sustain the momentum. And that sustaining the momentum probably is the guarantee to do that. You have an experience in Sierra Leone. What you can tell us about?
Yes. How to carry on with that, I think, is the question of what we refer to back home for the young people, making themselves relevant. We've realized over time that we've come up with policies, programs, and so many laws for the continent as a whole. For young people, many people have made their own different interventions, but over time, the question of implementation has always been very much cardinal. And the young people see things as being, rhetorical. So for us, given the experience, our most recent experience, the Ebola epidemic, our collective resolve, mark you, our recent history also, the end of the Civil War in the early 2000s, and we had the Ebola also, because of the resolve amongst the citizenry of the nation, especially the young people, using their energies, using their exuberance to ensure that they work hand in glove with leaders, community people, to put a halt to the spread of the Ebola. They were very much, central in doing that. And this is also as a result of the space that is given to the young people from a government perspective. You will note, given our recent history of recent times, we are one of the nations that has given so much space on the participation of young people. And on policy fronts, we have almost all the policies. I followed this morning interventions coming from speakers. We have all of them, domesticating the African Youth Charter, reviewing our youth policies, coming up with laws on National Youth Service Scheme, issues of, even the reviewed policy is very much central on the issue of the different categories of young people, because we have different young people. We have those that are educated, uneducated, those coming from rural, urban, we have female youth, male youth. They all have different aspirations, and therefore it's not a one-size-fits-all. So we believe as a government is giving them the enabling space, caring for them, also improving on the budgetary allocations. And most important of all is placing the government at the center, ensuring that all those institutions that are making interventions on issues of young people are now being coordinated by the Ministry of Youth Affairs. That is to say, we are able to keep track of what is happening so that collectively, if we continue that path, they will have the confidence, because, in Africa, it has always been issues of transparency, corruption. But if we are very clear and transparent in our interventions, including the INGOs, the NGOs, civil society, then the young people will have the confidence to continue to do the work, especially that which they did during the course of halting the Ebola epidemic. So we have the right policies, we have the right programs, and above all, we have many young people now being leaders, so it becomes a kind of peer educators. Myself, there are other people who are much younger than myself who are ministers, we have speakers of parliament, members of parliament, young people at echelons of power who are now leaders. So this is giving a kind of encouragement to the young people.
Thank you very much. We have a special thing about this mic, actually. This mic is going to fly now. It's a flying mic. So, and you have another one? Okay, we have all the mics are flying here. So great. We will have 5 questions to our 5 panelists from 5 young leaders, and we need 5 answers. So let's go get the 5 questions. We'll collect the questions all at once.
Okay.
Nisambula Vinaka. My name is Kesai Mbamba. I'm from Fiji. I'm with the Youth Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Rights. My question is for the Honourable Minister Alimamy Kamara. You mentioned that we need more budgetary allocation and that youth ministries should coordinate what other agencies are doing in regards to youth. In some places around the world, having a youth ministry can actually lead to the compartmentalization of youth development. So, for example, if you go to the Ministry for Employment to speak about youth unemployment, you'll be sent to the Ministry of Youth because that's about youth. How can the SDGs be used to encourage governments to better fund youth ministries, or is it more a case of mainstreaming youth across government agencies? Naka.
Thank you. Get the next one.
I'm Lotte Dijkstra. I'm the Dutch Youth Ambassador for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. And I have a question for State Secretary Justine Greening. What structures do you think or processes can governments put in place to ensure meaningful youth involvement in the monitoring of the SDGs? And how do you feel about governments appointing a special youth ambassador or a youth ombudsman nationally to ensure youth will not be left behind in the implementation? And also, would you consider this in the UK?
Good. Third.
I'm Daniel, youth representative from Republic of Macedonia, and I grew up in Essex Children's Village, and now I make campaigns for supporting young people without parents to find a job. I have one comment and one question. We the youth want, need, and have a right for decent employment. Today, in this room, we heard a lot emphasis on providing skill-based training to join the labor market. However, we the young people want to be part of knowledge-based economy. In addition, the notion of including children and youth echoed a lot, but my question to you all is how can we include children and youth without parental care? How can we ensure that children and youth who are most marginalized and vulnerable also get equipment to be the part of those discussions and beyond?
Thank you very much. We'll take one more. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Gwendolyn, Dutch Youth Ambassador for the One campaign. Through my own experience, I found out that on the one hand, local political leaders are more available than national political leaders when it comes to hearing about our demands. But on the other hand, citizens are more likely to get involved in actions that will affect them directly. So my question is, do you have good practices to share on how to have an impact at the local level or how to engage people locally?
And who do you wish to answer that one?
It's just in general.
Okay, and do we have a last one? That question? Yeah.
Hi, Ian O'Connor from Unitarian Universalist United Nations Office, and my question is for Ms. Helen Clark. How can UNDP increase its capacity for youth to be in governance, and particularly with Goal 16 as well?
Okay, wonderful. We have a good meeting here. So how about starting with you, Honourable Minister?
Okay. Quickly, I will look at the concerns of monitoring the SDGs. And also the issue of budgetary allocation. For us, like I said, at policy level, we establish different structures. We have what we call the National Youth Councils, which goes to district youth councils, and you have chiefdom youth councils and also zonal youth councils. So meaning even at the local level, the smallest of all the units, you have a youth representation in terms of leadership. We believe that is core whenever, there are issues of development in general for the community, in the respective communities. These structures will come into play and see how they could give a collective or quality leadership for the young people. But coming to the issue of budgetary allocation, yes, it is true. It's not just typical of Asia or Europe. Africa, it is common that many times when it comes to direct budgetary allocations, you don't see much money directly given to young people through the Ministry of Youth Affairs. But you realize that youth issues are cross-cutting. And therefore, you have all other MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies doing programs for young people. What we've realized over time is bringing all these players at the center so that you identify resources available and utilize them for the benefit of the young people, like the health sector, issues of sexual reproductive health. Who are the players? Are young people, all those women who are given birth to, looking at the African age bracket for young people, 15 to 35, are young women. So you have to work with the Ministry of Health. So whatever is allocated on issues of maternal health, other issues of health dealing with young people, if you harness that, you bring it together, you see that if you collect everything to some extent, once there is transparency and accountability, it will be appreciable. Because many times we'll say youth ministries are not a government on their own. So we cannot have everything being directed just for youth. We have women issue, we have other elderly and other programs. Then quickly
Can we leave that?
Okay.
Just because I'm mindful of the time that Administrator and the Secretary of State, because I know you have to be somewhere else at 3 p.m. So how about getting your answers?
Sorry, our Prime Minister is actually making his statement to the General Assembly, so I can't be late for that.
Of course.
But to answer your question, I think it's a really good challenge. And so we saw some of the amazing work that was done in Sierra Leone by young people. I remember going through a village on one of my visits there, literally seeing this young man in the middle of the village with a load of people around him, and he was briefing them on how to stay safe. So there's no doubt in my mind that young people can have a big role to play on implementation, and I think those kinds of projects show us the way. On accountability, I actually think we can do a much better job on using technology for young people when they're beneficiaries, so that they can easily say, have I or have I not got what I was meant to get, and was it good, and what was my experience? Your other two questions, I mean, we've brought the youth delegates, really, because we think it's important. I'm sure that when we get back to the UK, I'll be sitting down with both of them and we'll be having a fuller discussion about how did it work, what did we learn, and in fact we're already talking about what our next steps are on implementing the global goals back in the UK, but also what the role of youth can be in the UK on helping us advocate more broadly for tackling the global goals. So I think we're at the beginning of hopefully a really exciting journey on how we now take these forward ourselves as a country.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Administrator.
Well, great questions and some reflections. Firstly, on Ebola, I totally agree with Justine and with Youth Minister about the inspirational role of the young people. You know, they were going door to door, you know, putting their own lives on the line to try to support the identification of where there was illness and getting the people who could do something about it to the scene. And I didn't meet young people in Sierra Leone, but I did in both Guinea and in Liberia who were doing this work when I went. So, you know, full marks to them. And I think one of the concerns of the leaders of countries was that the youth was so empowered by this, they don't want to just go back to doing nothing. And so coming out of the Ebola recovery, it's so critical that jobs, opportunity, schooling is part of that for the youth. Second point, yes, youth is obviously a very, very cross-cutting issue. When I was Prime Minister of my country, we always had a system where all the different ministries got to comment on any cabinet paper for decision that they wanted to. So that meant that the women always had a, please Justine, the women's ministry always was able to have a perspective, the youth ministry and all the other sector ministries. And that's a good way of running a youth lens over all the policy. Third point, someone made the comment about local leaders often being more accessible than national. And that's absolutely true by the nature of things. So when we talk about organising youth councils, I think they're as important at the local level as they are at the national level. And at the national level, they often aggregate up, right? So they're active around the country, but that then sort of percolates up to representation on a national youth council. We had questions both from Fiji and from former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, both countries, by the way, where UNDP has been active with youth councils. Also, see your local member of parliament in the national parliament as a local figure. They tend to be accessible. They've got to be elected, so they've got to be accessible. So again, I think youth can rally around them. And I think my last point would be the huge importance of civic education, so that young people know what the entry points are. How do you lobby? How do you articulate? Because you can do a lot, online with your social media, you can have your groups, but in the end you've got to get your views into the formal system. So what are the entry points for that? I think it's an important part of education actually for young people to know how they do use the levers that are there to influence policies.
Thank you very much. Farah?
The esteemed panel have almost answered all questions, but there was this comment that I wanted to raise. Ever since we've started the process for the SDGs and until our current day, we've been asking the same question over and over again, and I've been at least asked this question 5 times this week, on how do we make sure young girls are part of the implementation of the SDGs? How do we make sure women are part of the SDGs? The structure of the question itself proves that there are still societal patriarchy forms around the world. Not even once have I been asked on how are world leaders ensuring that we are including young men and boys in the process of the SDGs? Inequality is pervasive and underlies in all aspects of discrimination and poverty. Young girls and women, ourselves, are not just a box you want to check on when you are including girls and young women. It's about improving the everyday realities for them. Providing comprehensive support for girls and young women meaningful and effective participation in political spaces, decision-making platforms, and much more. And this is by governments and world leaders maintaining their promise. And we are still very soon in the Sustainable Development Goals, and Jordan, my beloved country, has already backed down on its promise for Goal 5 by rejecting the female quota for the decentralization bill that the second time now. If that's the beginning, I'm hoping for a better one. Thank you.
Thanks, Farah. Nick, what do you want?
Good. I'm going to go off script and just sort of summarize, because I know you're running out of time.
Off script, so.
Well, I mean, off question maybe, because all the questions I feel have been answered to a point. I would just simply say, like a broken record, communities of the world that we are all discussing as if they're a third party have the agency, capability, will to do and solve nearly every single problem that they face every day of their single lives. And Ebola, the earthquake, has proved it, and aid needs to catch up with them. We need to get into communities, and there is nothing like young people to be both in there and here. And they are the link between people and the people who can control their own lives, and all of us who love to talk about it. And that's where the monitoring and the drive and the action needs to start.
Well, thank you very much. That's very powerful. I just want to conclude. I'm perfectly okay with leaving young people as beneficiaries, not partners, but you can't. You just simply can't afford them. I was just recently in India, and there are 800 million people in India under 35 years of age. So if you want to consider them beneficiaries only, you want to serve them, you need to bring another India to serve them, basically. So you just can't. It's a simple math. I think it's the only way forward. You can't achieve the SDGs without India, by the way. You can't achieve the SDGs without young people as well. And that's my concluding remark. I want to, again, thank very much Your Royal Highness for your leadership and your support. You really, your remarks were excellent opening for our event today, and I would like to thank all of you. And with that, I would like to hand the mic back, this flying mic, to our fantastic MCs.